This is the conference committee on T-bill, and we are here to hopefully to finish up. We are down to one issue, and how do you want to proceed? You guys have taken some testimony today on the last issue, which is the issue of trails, and
testimony, and then meetings upon meetings and readings upon readings, trying to get up to speed with what you had spent as much time as you have on.
and you spent a lot of time.
And we haven't spent anywhere near. And I certainly doesn't sense that it's a pretty hot topic out and amongst a lot of the at least people directly affected by it, or at least maybe by extension infected. So I am very concerned about us agreeing or disagreeing on it without more testimony. But I also aware that there is on like the 6th month of since the last motion were filed in this, case that I guess is driven toward. So we're, that's why it's the last one. I know we had talked about looking at 3 options. Whether we leave it in, we take it out, or we leave it in with a passage date that is somewhere in the future, which I heard 12 months or 18 months. And I don't know if we agreed to what to put on it in terms of the 3 options. I'm not sure where we all stand on that, but those are the 3 options that I believe were being worked on to bring with us for this afternoon. Is that how we agreed earlier today?
I actually think what's really, and I need to say this, what's really clear is no one wants to put the communities in a bad position, and everybody wants to help the communities. The question really is, what's the best way to get there, that we don't do anything that what's the best way to get there?
And that's ultimately our dilemma is, do we do or we don't, and we have a lot of smart people of my knowledge that are in agreement on that. It seems like if we do something that, we think we're in a good place, and if we don't, people said, towns are going to be at a disadvantage. Our comfort level right now is, even though it's maybe a small percentage that the lawsuit plays on, particularly with this landowner winning, that has ramifications for the testimony that we received. If we put language in regarding the maintenance, that would open up the possibility of towns having to go back to the communities where these trails are and renegotiate maintenance, agreements. Might be small. You could have a jar of Skittles there, and there only can be 1 poison pill, 2 poison pills, but you're probably not going to go in there and grab one. So our comfort level, at least maybe speak for myself, but or not, is not there to move forward on this. And what options, do we have? Do we just sort of put brakes on this, pause a little bit, leave this open, or try to find another avenue for us to take testimony and take this section and put another, find another bill, to put it in or to move forward? But, we find our comfort. It's just unfortunate because, like you said, if you want to help towns, there's no doubt about that. But we have to be smart about going about doing that in the right way.
I certainly could say the one thing that our side is totally agreed, it sounds like yours, is that how we recognize that it's been there for this long. Yes. And we are very much on the side of how do we best help the town. I certainly would have to agree that I have heard that taking an action does not bring the certainty that some people think it would, and places other that I've gone for advice say that court will make a decision, and we will then be back here in January. Whether we make an action or not, we'll be back here in January looking at pieces of it. Where I'm sitting is taking an action on it is, without really understanding that, says that the most prudent thing to do is to wait.
And I'm feeling much more comfortable with living here based on things that information I've received. So we're not all aligned at this point.
Do you have a proposal, or is that just kind of like a statement of?
Well, I mean, I guess the proposal is to take it out. That's the, or,
Well,
yeah.
that is
Yeah.
that is the proposal. If we be asked that we would remove that last section that we're in.
Yeah, I'm happy to weigh in. I would just say that I would not be comfortable with us moving in a direction to take it out at this point. What I've heard from my municipalities, the nonprofits that maintain our trails, is that the looming lack of clarity that has been caused by this legal case could limit the maintenance of trails this summer, even this spring, happening right now. And what we're hoping to do with this shortened version of S4, to my understanding, is to give that clarity of a practice that has been in existence since the 80s of towns being able to maintain those trails. And whether the lawsuit goes one way or the other is kind of irrelevant to me in some regard, because what I understand the language to be is that we need to clarify it so that it is clear, and that we could have been preventing a lawsuit from happening if we had done this sooner to clarify it. But at the bottom line, if we go without doing something this legislative session, and I hear from the Woodstock Bike Association and the Tunbridge Trails folks and the plethora of hundreds of miles of trails in my district saying we are unsure if we can maintain the trails this summer, that is going to be an economic loss for my community. And that's not something I'm comfortable with backing away from. So I understand you haven't gotten the level of testimony, and there is like this strange kind of legal case that's happened because a very well-regarded law professor is kind of leading the charge on it. At the end of the day, I think the risk is more if we don't do something than if we wait. But obviously that's one perspective. And I think ultimately what was persuasive in committee on the bill, we didn't put the full S4 bill in there because of this. So I think the only way I would feel comfortable with removal is if we had some kind of guarantee that you would be including it in the DMV bill or another, if you needed more time to get comfortable with it, and that's truly the issue. That would be the only way that I personally would feel
I would
comfortable
be
with it.
completely committed, if that's possible to do, to bring it
within my budget.
if it is possible, as the chair of House Transportation, if we can bring it, we have plenty of time on our schedule. We are for the next plus week and to take all the testimony that is out there. And if we can do that and put the T-bill to settlement today on an agreement and a commitment, however that has to look, we can spend the next 2 weeks hearing from all of our legal cities and towns. And I don't have legal trails in Swanton, but I certainly am anxious to hear all my neighboring towns and pieces. But so, because I think everybody here is united in that this supporting of the towns is the key. I would commit to you that we will put the next 2 weeks of agenda on this, and we will keep the DMV bill open if that is an option.
Well, I went to Betsy Ann to see whether that was a possibility, whether it's and she looked
What was the possibility?
to add this to the DMV bill.
Right.
Take this section, just
Why wouldn't
put
it?
it in there, which would give us, which that was a good thought, and just thought we should double check before we went ahead. And she looked over the DMV bill and looked over the language and did not feel that it was germane. I don't know.
But you have the bill in your committee, you can have anything.
Yeah,
It's not a
that-
conference committee.
Yeah, that's what I don't understand is that what we gotta talk about. Our guarantee is that before we close this out, we're gonna try to find a vehicle. Hopefully that's the DMV bill. It might be another bill, but my understanding is that we get to determine germaneness, and when it comes out of
Doesn't-
our body, it goes to the floor.
So
Then it becomes a germaneness issue.
The way it works is, one, the issue has to be raised on the floor.
the germaneness issue. But are you talking about finance committee or adding anything to any bill?
So both. So with the conference committee, you can't add anything new to it.
I understand.
Although.
That's not what they're talking about doing.
Right,
They're talking about
this
the
would be
DMV.
the DMV bill, so the amendment, committee amendment. Could be, so based on Betsy Ann's initial review of that, or the House Clerk's initial review of that. It sounds like if the question was called on the floor as to whether the amendment by the House Transportation Committee were germane. Her ruling on the issue would be that it is not, but then the body can vote to suspend its rules
I don't,
to hear the,
I totally disagree
Anyway.
with that premise.
yeah,
Because the bill's not on our committee. We get to determine, we put the package together and then that becomes germaneness. The Senate doesn't
They
dictate.
do a
what-
strike on the bill.
Bill,
yeah,
yes.
we're getting to strikeout.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I,
so,
yeah, I gotta get clarification on that because I
But it-
fundamentally agree that we're not allowed to determine.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
can't speak
Yeah,
for the clerk. I'm just
Yeah.
going off of what
And it
Representative
was
Perkins.
quick, you know, it was a.
Yeah.
But we can find out under-
For the bill.
Yeah.
She looked at the language, she said it doesn't seem like it is, and it raises a red flag.
but you shouldn't even have to look to the bill. The question is who determines germaneness before it goes to the
Bill,
floor?
yeah.
Right, we do.
So you guys, so
Yeah.
I think the issue for our side is.
Yeah.
If you keep it in the T-bill and do a effective date that's a year out or something, it's in a bill that must pass. But it's, won't be there till next year. We have next session to change it if we want. If we move it to another bill, you never know what's gonna happen. It could go in this other bill, but maybe that gets hung up. It's like what's, for us that want to make it happen, what's worse, putting in another bill and hoping that it all works out, or putting it in this bill, which is a must pass bill. Cause I've been out here where miscellaneous DMV bills don't pass. So
Is it an option to hold off and give us some time to take some more testimony?
The pressure that I'll tell you that we're under is, we've been told to get the money bills done. And there is that pressure out there.
Yeah.
And regardless of whether we did this or not, they've asked me and the President Pro Tem's office to make sure I'd like to get this done today, but they said to me no later than Monday, period, end of sentence. So I'm a little under the gun with all of them to move this along. You know, there's no reason for us not to trust you. And what that's the only question.
Yeah,
We
we would
got in that.
move forward. The question is about germaneness.
well, would you accept the other proposal, this, just so we know whether it's on the table or not, about keeping it in the bill that have that stuff effective in June 2026?
Well, then that gives us next winter.
Well, it gives us next winter, but then it's already in there. We don't know if it should go in there. I mean, sometimes, as you know, it's harder to get things out than, you know, once they're in. I mean, we can discuss.
So
It's, you know what I'm saying?
I totally get what you're saying. In
Yeah.
one side that you would have to trust us that
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
send something
Yeah,
over.
yeah.
And quite
Yeah.
frankly,
Yeah.
I think regardless of whatever happens in this court case,
Mm-hmm.
whether it goes in favor of the towns, we're probably gonna have to do some doctor up to help the towns.
Yeah.
If it's not a doctor up and it goes, we're gonna have to spend a lot of time on this
Absolutely,
bill.
yeah.
Thinking about what we're gonna do. I think the two options on the table are, we hope that you get a bill over to us, that we can work in something like the miscellaneous DMV bill to get this. Or we left this in the bill with an effective date. A year from now. And then that way the language is there, everybody's clear on how we feel about all of this. And we do have preserved the option to work on this next winter. So those are kind of the two things that I
Okay.
see on the table that might work to get us something.
If there's the option of with an effective date out of the year, and the commitment that we, or well, whether for or against, we're likely back in it.
Yeah.
What does it provide if we're going back into it either way? And we haven't heard whether it has an impact to do that or not, and we haven't been able to explore that. How's that different than pulling it out entirely?
I think if there's some language there, it certainly gives
Yeah.
Senator White the opportunity to say to people in her community, this is what our intention is. And for the rest of us that are in the legislature in this place, if the court case goes contrary to what we think, we've got next winter and next session to work on this and make adjustments. And I think regardless of how they do, we're going to be back here doing a bill. Period. End of sentence. There's no chance that we're not. And, you know, everybody talks about the decision that coming out of Superior Court as if it's going to be a black or white decision. I'm not really sure it's going to be a black or white decision. I think Damien has raised the issue, for example, a number of these trails were built on class 4 roads. Does that mean that the full width of what that road was, the 48 feet, how does that get maintained? I think, and I'm going to speak for myself, one of the reasons I don't want to get ahead of the court is I'm not sure. I'm antsy about all of that. And I think as you guys get into this, it's more complicated than people seem to want us to.
Well, if it was simple.
Yes, I know.
If I knew that taking the action of the next grade was going to help, then we would already be signing. And that is very, because we're all clearly wanting the same thing, but I get very different message of what the message sends when we take an action. In that particular case, my general inclination is to wait. And that is part of the advice that we've heard. So that I'm not helping there, but what's our time constraint for this afternoon? In other words, for a 10-minute recess or not? You have other.
No, but we've got a few minutes.
I'm not saying we have to do that right now. I'm just suggesting that. I am suggesting.
Do you guys want to
Yeah,
talk?
I'm suggesting that.
Yeah, why don't you go? I think Senate Appropriations.
Yeah, you should go in that room.
Yeah, go in Senate Appropriations. And come back.
House appropriations, wanted just to go back.
Do you want me to?
Oh, yeah.